Welcome to today's Cabinet of the 13th of October 2022. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Eade.
Councillor Eade, and I understand the Chief Executive is also not attending today and giving his apologies, so we'll note those. And Councillor Nelson, you're in place of Councillor Eade and Councillor Dugmore. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for attending. Item 2 then is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for the agenda that's in front of us today? No. Okay. In which case we'll move to the minutes of our previous meeting. Are we happy to take those as a true record?
Move them.
Okay, those will be signed in due course. Item 4 is leaders' announcements. I just wanted to pick up on one item, which is the hospital. Clearly, we've had a fantastic response from our community. Over 15,000 people have now signed our petition to the Deputy Prime Minister to reverse the government's downgrade plan of the A&E and the Women's and Children's Unit. We are hoping to be able to hand that letter over in Downing Street in the coming weeks, but we'll also be writing and communicating to each household to make them aware. It can't make sense that Telford will be the largest town in the country without a fully functioning A&E. We know that. And it can't make sense that a capital programme that costs £600 million to implement has only been provided £311 million of funding from the government. I think there's a deep set of concerns about what will give, what corners will be crossed, what provision won't come or be retained in Telford if there's such a big budget gap. So hopefully this is going to continue to be an area of cross-party support. It has been traditionally at this council. We look forward to building that cross-party consensus again, and we look forward to working with our members of Parliament and our colleagues across the region to make the case, because we do know that if you live in Wolverhampton or you live in Stafford, you will be affected if Telford's A&E closes, because people will then move over to those services. And I also think that the clinical comments from clinical bodies about this A&E local should concern us all. There's been widespread concern, and the way I think about it, it's almost like going to a Tesco supermarket or going into a corner shop. An A&E local is by definition not a fully functioning A&E. It's the equivalent of a convenience store, and we need to make sure that we're making that point. And of course, lots of other people, including myself, are very concerned about the loss of the consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit, only opened 5 years ago at the cost of £26 million based on clinical need, and we'll be making that case to health bosses too. But we do hope that the new government, the new Health Secretary, who happens to be the Deputy Prime Minister as well, so number 2 in the government, will be able to take a keen and close interest on this issue. That's what I want to say under Leader's announcement. Members of the Cabinet will be aware that an urgent item has been added to the agenda. This is an update in relation to the child sexual exploitation inquiry. As chair of this meeting, I've agreed to that request for it to be included as an urgent item on the basis that that if we were to wait to the next meeting for this item to be brought forward, this would result in an unreasonable delay in securing individuals to fulfil the roles set out in the report, and also prejudice the Council's ability to crack on and progress with the programme of implementation of the recommendations from the independent inquiry, which I know everybody is keen to do. I've therefore agreed that request from Council officers, and I'll take that item first, given its urgency. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Leader. Everyone will be aware that the independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Telford published its report on the 12th of July 2022. I think it's worthwhile reflecting for a few seconds on the nature of that inquiry. It was commissioned in 2018. It lasted 4 years. The scope of the inquiry stretched back over 40 years. It examined the role of Telford Wrekin Council, and before that Shropshire County Council, the police, health services and other agencies. The council itself provided over 1 million pages of evidence, and from that inquiry came 47 recommendations. Of these recommendations, 22 are the sole responsibility of the council to deliver, 6 are the responsibility of West Mercia Police, 5 are the responsibility of academies and colleges that fall outside our control, and 4 the responsibility of the integrated care system. 2 days after the publication of the report in July 2022, the Leader confirmed at both Cabinet and at full council that week that we will implement all recommendations in full and before the deadline set by Tom Crow, the KC, that we commit to the ongoing funding of the specialist team of social workers, the Kate team, for as long as this administration is in control of the council, and that we had secured support from 3 independent survivors, people with lived experience of sexual exploitation and experience of advising other councils and organisations, who happened also to play a fundamental and significant role on the Independent Survivors Committee, which ensured the inquiry remained independent. They will now work with us, or they are working with us, in implementing the recommendations and to ensure that the approach being taken was one which had survivors at its very heart. In the inquiry report, Tom Crowther quoted that the Survivors Committee was crucially important in ensuring that the independent inquiry reflected the needs and concerns of victims and survivors of child sexual exploitation, and that we all acknowledge the pain that they have and continue to feel. It is absolutely essential that continues as we implement the recommendations. The report that has been brought today before you provides an update on the work that has been ongoing since the publication of the report and sets out the governance model that has been agreed with partners, including, and finally, to seek agreement to proceed to securing the services of 2 independent chairs and an independent facilitator as set out in the report. Also set out is a governance model that has been developed to ensure that both the council and partners work towards implementation, whilst also providing a forum for ensuring that the council and partners engage with those with lived experience. The appendix shows this in visual form and also demonstrates the role of the Telford Wrekin Safeguarding Partnership. Each group leader has been invited to nominate a member of their group to sit on the cross-party member group to remain updated on progress, and we await their input. Members will also see that the model provides for scrutiny from all members through the Scrutiny Assembly, and again we welcome, and I'll repeat that, we welcome that oversight and scrutiny. Also set out in the report, the council has engaged with 3 survivors, as I mentioned earlier, who have agreed to act as independent lived experience consultees to support us through that process. Their comments are also included in the report. I am pleased to report that progress has already been made on the recommendations, and in paragraph 3.8 we set out in more detail, including 2 recommendations that have been completed and a further 4 that are underway. I am also pleased to say that the action plan that has been created is intended to get us to a point where all recommendations have been implemented by the end of next year, and that will be 6 months ahead of the schedule set by Tom Crowther KC, as I alluded to earlier. And I just want to finish with this repeated commitment to anyone listening. Just as we delivered on our commitment to leave no stone unturned through an independent inquiry stretching back 40 years, that same commitment now applies to our work in implementing these recommendations. I would like to move all of those recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, is that seconded? Seconded, thank you. Any comments or questions for members of the Cabinet? No? Bill?
Yeah, obviously initially I was disappointed that the report came out quite late yesterday at 3 o'clock, which in the spirit of cooperation went against it, but I fully understand the urgency and the fact we haven't got another Cabinet meeting coming up soon. So I welcome the fact that the report's been brought forward, basically as soon as possibly can. I welcome the fact we've got independents coming in after political groups as well as political groups, so it's been with 2 independent chairs and a facilitator. I think from the public and the survivors' perception, that's very, very welcome. Our group's already nominated who we wish to serve on the 3-member committee of members. So I think we look forward to just getting on with it really and everyone getting involved. The only small technical point I've got, which I have mentioned to the legal officer before, it's just that the previous committee that was set up, the TSC committee, that was set up to initiate and oversee and get up and running the actual previous independent review. It's just that formally whether those members are now, if that group's particularly, because it's not in that structure obviously, it's going to be told formally it'll be disbanded, or where they sit. Because I think they need to know really, because they might be sitting partly in limbo. You know, already had an individual conversation with them, I'm not aware of that.
Councillor Nelson? Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Carter, for that presentation. We have a severe difficulty with the way that this is being done. And the reason is that for us, it is fundamental that going forward, the oversight of how recommendations are implemented is fully independent. And that's completely independent of this council and of members of this council. And one small element of that is the proposal, which we were aware of from 3 o'clock yesterday, and it's 10 o'clock this morning, doesn't need very long to explore the report, makes reference to a cross-member group, and yet my understanding is my group leader has already refused a member to that group. So I'm not absolutely sure, in fact I know we can't have a procedure and a process which has already been disqualified, because we cannot take part in that, because it must be independent. The ITSE report was issued back in 12th of July this year. We fast forward to yesterday, 12th of October, that's 3 months, and yet we're only being made aware of this proposal to introduce the recommendations yesterday. It is not good enough, it is not open, it is not transparent government, and as such we can't give our fully considered opinion on the proposal on such short notice. However, one can say that it does appear to be somewhat rushed, unusually for most of the reports that I've read in terms of this cabinet, the spelling mistakes, which is unnecessary, and the complexity of what's proposed is difficult to understand and read. It appears to be circular, it's got some self-fulfilling elements. The strategic group has got the role of monitoring the activity of partners, but it's not fully independent, because those are council officers on the strategic group, among others, and the strategic group has responsibility for reporting to full council. That's the council reporting on itself, and that is a circular process. It's not independent, it's not transparent. As such, we will need to reserve our position on that report. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring Lee back here, I just want to pick up on a couple of points that you made, Councillor Nelson. So the first point would be that the cross-party group, the 3-member group, where group leaders were asked to nominate to that group, was something that was done before the August break. So that work and that thinking has been started. I accept that your leader has decided that your group doesn't want to be part of that, but that doesn't mean you veto that ability, because that is something that that other groups have decided they want to work with, and that mirrors actually some of the other governance structures that we had in place when we had the on the lead up to the inquiry being published, and I think that balance between groups being involved and not being involved, we've tried to get a balance there that all groups are involved on a balanced basis, not a political balance basis, but on a balanced basis to provide that assurance. I accept there's a difference of opinion, but that isn't to say that it doesn't go forward. The second point in respect of the circular area item of this is that ultimately the ultimate arbiter of this will be when the inquiry chair comes back to assess us, and as Councillor Carter said, he's set himself a deadline of 2 years to come back. We want to be in a position where in 18 months' time we invite him back early, and it will be for him ultimately to make the decision about whether those recommendations have been implemented. But equally, the partnership, and I know it's very difficult for those who want to just attack the council, but the partnership is the Police and Crime Commissioner, the police, health and others too, and therefore this council cannot be in a position where we're responsible for all the recommendations. By virtue of these recommendations don't apply to us, they apply to other agencies, and therefore they will have a process to go through. But I do genuinely think that the central argument that you're making is, on the one sense, it's rushed, but on the other hand, it's not going quick enough. And I think we're trying to seek a balance between making sure that we are keeping momentum going, bringing people with us, having that independent survivors group, which is going to really help us implement these recommendations in a way that they can sign up to, and equally make sure that we're able to be as transparent as possible. The alternative to not having the report today would be a further delay, and I think that then we would be criticised for a further delay. So I do know that the group, your group leader, had an individual briefing ahead of today's cabinet on this. So we are trying to get that balance right. Lee, did you want to pick up any other points?
No, you've covered most points. Listen, this is complex, and I'm disappointed there's been no acknowledgement of the fact that it's a very, very complex way forward. The same as putting in place a truly independent inquiry was a complex process. There's also no acknowledgement that has been progress made already on completion of 2 recommendations and a further 4. I think it's also fair to say that the structure as it looks now probably is closely resembles what Tom Crowther KC was alluding to.
Yeah.
In fact, that there should be a review team that's made up of the organisation survivors, and that is chaired by an independent body, which we're in the process of recruiting to. Listen, I hope we're not going to get into politics on this, but I can make this absolute assurance: we're not going to delay, as there was some delay to the start of that inquiry around process, and a hint of deliberately slowing down that process to make it look like we were slowing the start of the inquiry. I hope that's not going to play out here, but we're not going to delay. We're going to get on with this. The independent people will be appointed. I hope you can use your leverage and your influence over your group leader to nominate that cross-party group as soon as possible, so that can start, and we're going to get on. And I'll just repeat that commitment. The same way that we diligently and thoroughly made sure that there was a proper independent inquiry that produced 47 recommendations, we will use that same commitment and diligence to make sure that we deliver this to the most important people, the survivors, the victims, their families, so they can have complete reassurance that the systems we have in place here to protect people, our residents, against this horrific crime is the best it possibly can be, if not the best in the country. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it at pace long before Tom Crowther KC comes back and gives the ultimate verdict on that.
Okay, we had a good discussion on that. Thank you for that. It's been moved and it's been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, if we go to item 5 then, which is the corporate parenting strategy for 22-25, pages 9 to 32. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Leader. We have before you today our corporate parenting strategy for approval. Our children and young people's voices are at the heart of this strategy, and through working closely with them, we have together created our promise, which provides the framework of our support. Being a corporate parent is one of the most important roles that we as councillors undertake, making sure that we make a difference to the lives of the children in our care. We have a statutory duty to produce a strategy whilst ensuring that the voice of our children is at the heart of everything we do, and that our focus is on raising aspirations with positive outcomes for our children. Our strategy encompasses the 7 principles: promoting physical and mental health and well-being of those children and young people and acting in their best interests, encouraging young people to express their views, wishes and feelings, taking these views, wishes and feelings into account, helping young people access and make the best use of services, promoting high aspirations and best outcomes for young people, keeping young people safe and giving them stability in their home lives, relationships and educational work, and preparing our young people for adulthood and independent living. Our children's voice is at the core of our strategy, and their views have shaped our priorities and will continue to do so. We care passionately about our young people and giving them the best chance in life. This was recognised by Ofsted in our last outstanding inspection, who stated that our children were cared for and cared about. We will continue to provide the best we can so our children reach their full potential, enable them to dream, believe and achieve. Those achievements are shown very clearly this year. Our young people have achieved outstanding results in their exams, with their results being more than 6 times higher than the national average for children in care. Alongside their academic achievements, our young people are engaged in many other activities, including a residential stay at Arthog, the Summer Arts Project, the Great Hotshot Awards ceremony, and their involvement in the National Takeover Day, which I urge all my colleagues to get involved with and have a young person working with you on that day this year. Our promise to our children in care is to continue to engage with them, to act on their feedback, and using opportunities like Bright Spot Survey and Voice to give our young people the opportunity to feedback on their experiences in care. Our new young persons panel will allow for two-way dialogue, focusing on their priorities, our actions and the impact of these, using an agreed method. You said, we will, and how will we know we've made a difference formula. Our cooperative parenting strategy has been designed to ensure our children in care have the best experience possible. Our administration is committed to our young people, investing over 31 million each year, providing the support necessary for our young people to become independent, successful adults. As a corporate parent, I always ask myself, is this good enough for my child? And if it isn't, it certainly isn't good enough for our children. Our administration has very high aspiration for our children, and we will continue to be a strong advocate for them. We show how much we care through our love, through our language, and very much through our actions. And we give all our children the opportunity to dream, believe and achieve. I'd like to thank the officers for all their work in this report. It clearly shows the care and dedication that is always put into making sure our children in care are put first, and I recommend to Cabinet that we approve 1.1 and 1.2, the corporate parenting strategy for 2022-25. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Is that seconded? Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, just to say, obviously, so pleased to see this report. It's a great report, and to see how we're moving forward with our corporate parenting strategy. As a corporate parent, I am so proud of our children's achievements this year. It is amazing to see how far we've come, and the virtual school, I know, is so important to that, and the way that we work with our young people in care across all the schools in Telford and Wrekin is wonderful. So great report. Thank you to the officers and all the hard work that I know goes into making sure the voice of our children is heard within that strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have the very great privilege of being a governor on the virtual school, so I get to see, you know, sort of quite closely the support that our children in care have from the education side at least, and obviously that support extends further as well. I'm really pleased with when I was reading this, there was lots of things that resonated for me back to the National Takeover Day last year and the conference we had, and we had a really inspirational speaker, Luke Rogers, who is a care leaver and who now works to sort of support and young people, and also give guidance to organisations like ours. And it really felt to me like the things that he was saying and the things that our young people then said following that session and during that day have really come through in this. Their voice, I can hear their voice in this document, and we can't do any better than that, can we, really? It has to reflect what our young people want. And I think, Shirley, you're right, you mentioned language, and of course actions are the key thing, but I think the language is important as well. You know, we are corporate parents. I know our young people probably think, you're not my parent, you know, and most, you know, they have parents. It's about our support for them and their families and their carers, and you know, and so, you know, I think this is really good report, really good strategy, reflects, I think, what young people are saying, the things I hear through virtual school, the things I heard on that takeover day. So, you know, absolutely happy to support this strategy.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, likewise, I really welcome what I think is a very well laid out strategy. It's a dynamic one. It's saying not just what we have done, but what we will do, and it's clear. So I think we need to congratulate officers on that. For me, I love the emphasis throughout on children's voice. That's something I've always fought for and believed in my professional career. There's one statistic, I think, which says it all about how well we do on this front, although obviously still more to do, and that's the percentage of care of young people in care who are in education, employment and training, which is at 70% compared to the 52% nationally. That statistic, I think, is really telling in terms of our commitment. Obviously, we want to see that even higher, but I think it shows our commitment and the good work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eileen?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I really want to thank officers for the strategy. You know, this isn't an easy area for us, and I think we're always looking to make sure that we're going that extra mile for children that are in care. I mean, even calling them children in care, we refer to them as cared for children, and I think that's more important than anything, that they know that we absolutely are invested and we absolutely care about what happens to them, and that they get the very best outcome from their situation. Just to echo what Carolyn said about the takeover day last year, first one that I'd been involved with, but it was absolutely amazing to meet those young people, and you could see the massive potential that was in that room, and I came away feeling really attached to my the child that had shadowed me for the day. So I just think that kind of work is really, really important, to be involved in what's going on there. But also what Andy said about the voice of the children coming through in this strategy, and I think that for me is the key part of this. We've got to keep that voice. The loudest thing that we hear is the voice of the children coming through, and keep feeding that in. So I think this strategy does do that, so I really welcome it. Thanks.
Thank you, Eileen. Bill?
Yeah, I very much welcome the report, and I think the background to it is, the class is excellent from what we're doing on children. So as an opposition person, you get that assurance that we're doing pretty much a really good job for a lot of the kids. It is sobering, isn't it? When you think we've got 457 children. Not that big a town, it's a lot of children. You think that my primary school, I said secondary school, it's a lot of kids that are having to be looked after by us. And it is sobering, really, the fact we've got to do that. And when people wonder what local authorities spend their money on, and you realise the responsibility we have for these children, it's imperative that we give them all the service. There was an article I read the other day, and I've got no principle between whether it's provided for by us in the house or provided for us by independent private companies. But just a note of concern that for some areas, some local authorities, probably not ours, they haven't realised that some of the care companies that are providing this care, which is a small number of our children, most of our kids are in foster care or agency foster care, and they make a lot of money out of this, some companies are. So it's just that little niggle at the back of your mind, thinking we have to keep, watching the brief on our own homes previously, and whether that strategy has been reviewed to see whether there's more we could do by employing and creating our own homes to put it there privately. I'm fully appreciative that some of it is really specialist stuff, which you wouldn't get the economies of scale by doing it yourself, and you need to go outside. And just the other one, the other stat, 47% of the youngsters are outside already. And that probably is because of more than not because of their own safety. You have to take them away from issues that are probably being in their own authority, but whether or not all of those have to go outside of us, or whether we could try and provide more, or find companies that can provide more locally, but make sure you can answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Very briefly, we commend the strategy, particularly from the point of view of the aspiration that we have for the young people. Being a parent is an incredibly difficult job. I can speak from experience, I'm sure many of us can, whether their children like mine are grown up, and are now very able to articulate how difficult a job parenting is and the job I made of it. So it's very important and heartening to see the council is so aspirational regarding the young people whom we are at arm's length but corporate parent, and the strategy in reading it very, very clearly comes through that we're referring to what the young people aspire for themselves, which means at least they've been asked, which is a very positive thing. Something that we would often reference, and this is not a criticism, it's observation, in regard to council strategies, is that we're good on description, good on aspiration, we refer to the things we're going to do, but what we don't do so much is make the measures of whether we achieve what we're going to do objective. And this report's an example of that, where in many cases it says we will aspire to a high, for instance, proportion. It's not defining what high is. I just ask that we review that, look at numeric targets, because many of the aspirations and the targets saying we want to see an increase, but increase could be 1, That's not necessarily progress. An increase of 20% can be progress. I've just asked that.
So let's do top-down targets.
Yes, please. With some numbers.
I thought that wasn't overly more top-down targets, but maybe...
Top-down targets is your phrase. I'm looking at some objective targets.
But there's a
Thank
couple
you.
of things really across the board to pick up on there. One of the things that one of my colleagues mentioned was about the really good number of young people that are either in work or in education. One of the things that I know this administration has invested in, which has made a difference, is we've actually got a needs worker who works just with this cohort of young people, and that has made a real difference. We know exactly where each one of our children are, we can track them, we know exactly where their journey is, and when they finish school we know the destination, and they're picked up on very, very quickly and worked with. And so that investment that we've decided to make has made a real positive impact, and that is something we will be continuing to do. And in fact it's a really good role to roll out, and I don't know if any of you picked up the numbers for our needs are really dropping. They're really good, and so that model does work. Obviously it takes investment, which costs, and that's always a difficulty for local councils, but we will always invest in our children wherever we can. I think you mentioned, Bill, about the numbers of costs on that. I can assure you we do have a cost improvement panel that meets very regularly. Every child, every case is looked at individually, and if there is appropriate measures where children can be stepped down, which is right for them, they are always taken. But it is very much a case-by-case basis, and some children do need specialist care, which unfortunately, as has been alluded to, comes at a cost, and the market out there is very tough, and we are at the behest of the providers, but we always do. Our method is what's best for that child. So yes, we are keeping an eye on the finance, but that has to be measured against what is best for that child and what's giving the best outcome. And I think somebody also mentioned about how many children were outside of the borough, and in some cases children have to be outside of the borough because that is part of the legal requirement, but being out of the borough might be being placed actually in Bridge North. So it's not always miles away, which is what we tend to think of in our head. It's just outside of Telford and Wrekin, and it's again case by case what is best for the child. But we are doing what we can. We're increasing all our foster numbers. They're really good. We're about to have yet another campaign, and it's not just on our fostering, but we also do on our fostering plus, and we also look at special guardianships. So we are increasing that number because we do know wherever possible that is one of the best outcomes for our young people. I do think we've got targets in there, but maybe they're not strong enough for you. We talk about targets, we look at the exams, and we are benchmarking ourselves against national figures. So we know that our exam results are incredibly strong this year, more than 6 times higher than benchmark. We knew our NEETs were much better because actually we're at 70% rather than 50. But I'm sure if we talk to officers, but they've got to be meaningful targets, because if you've got a small cohort, you might be looking at one cohort of exams and you've only got 5 children in that cohort. It's very difficult talking in percentages. You only need one child not to be able to take that exam, and straight away you're 20% down. So it's not looking at the figures like you have across the board in some of the schools, the virtual schools. Some of the cohorts are really low numbers, so talking in percentages would disproportionately skew the figures for them if you've only got a cohort of 5 and you take one off it. So I do take your point, and I will ask officers to look at it, but it's looking at measures that are appropriate for our targets. It may not always be a percentage, but I'm sure you can go away, Simon, and the team, and we'll look at something. I hope I've picked up on everybody what they wanted.
Thank you, and thank you for the recognition of the aspiration around this, Tim, because I think everybody in this room, regardless of party political persuasion, officer, member, we're all absolutely aspirational for our children, and the things that we're doing across the borough is incredible. And I think, as Shirley quite rightly says, if you compare us to regional and national benchmarking, you can see that. I just wish that there was a bit of cross-party support on addressing the £2 billion nationally recognised shortfall in children's service funding. That's the line of the Conservative-led, currently the Conservative-led Local Government Association. It's analysed that £2 billion is the shortfall up and down the country, and that's not just Labour councils saying that, that's Conservative councils, Lib Dem councils, and there's been a defunding of children's services over the last decade. And if we are, I'm not quite sure who we're believing at the moment, it's the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's official spokesperson, but if there is further cuts coming our way as a result of the disastrous mini-budget a couple of weeks ago, that situation is going to get worse. So we can be aspirational for our young people. We can make massive improvements in their lives, but we could do far, far more if we were given the funding that we need and deserve, rather than the constant austerity and cuts that we're facing as a local authority family. Indeed. It's been moved, it's been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you, Simon, to the team. If we then move to item 6, pages 33 to 42, on the Councillors' Pride Fund, Councillor Paul Wyatt.
Thank you, Leader. This paper offers an update on the Council of Pride funds allocated in 2021, which was the year that saw members' individual budgets increase from £2,000 per annum to £5,000 in order to support communities to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. That year, a total of 328 proposals were submitted. Some councillors joined forces with colleagues to enable their funding to go further, meaning in total 257 grants were awarded. 100% of the budget was allocated. I think it's really important to note that we also got over £220,000 of match funding. So for every £1 allocated, Councillors' Pride Fund, 82 pence of match funding was secured. This is an increase of 37p per pound on 2020. The applications, all the applications to Councillors' Pride Fund must address one or more of the council's priorities through, although applications mainly tend to fall within 4 of the priorities. In 2021 we saw some fantastic projects, and the report contains many examples of these listed against the Council's priorities. Some examples to give you a flavour today include in Newport North West, a £400 grant supporting the running costs of Warm Welcome on a Wednesday, a dementia support group which offers vital opportunity for peer support and social interaction for those living with dementia and their families. 2,500 was awarded to Lady Grove Primary School to install a new daily mile running track. 2,500 was granted to install electric vehicle charging points in Woodside and Edgemond and Arkle Magna, and 8,900 granted and matched by 11,000 to install recycling bins in Open Gates, Ketley Bank, Newport North and West and Rockwoodine. A final example, in college, a grant of £500 helped with organise a celebration of awareness event recognising the local Windrush generation. The 2-month exhibition held at Telford College attracted visitors from across the country and as far away as Hong Kong. The event opened up conversations and many families have expressed an interest in submitting their stories for the next round of exhibitions. This event has helped to document and celebrate an important part of the borough's history. Leader, I move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Paul. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Richard?
Yeah. As you know, Lee, you started this off, and those small amounts of money can do an awful lot for our communities. And we've seen councils with the increased funding by CAMWAs to keep their communities safe. We've seen councils, as you've seen there, invest in their communities to put on celebration events. But we've also seen small groups gain funding from this. And I know the next item was the cost of living, but I had a group actually email me last night saying our insurance has gone up and they're a youth group, and do you have any money left to give us to support us because we can't afford to do it? And that's how hard it is out there, and that this small amount of money will help them continue and follow, and that youth group to continue. So this is valuable, it is welcome by all councils, everyone's spending it now and invested in their own communities, and you started off, Leader, so thanks for the idea, and let's make sure that councils continue to protect, care and invest by using this money in their communities for the fulfilment of their residents.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for your recognition. Kelly?
Just to say, it's a fantastic thing to be able to do. Councillor Evans and I are able to support a lot of groups and services in our community, and we were able to go out and see the value of those when they're running. So I think it's a fantastic thing to be able to provide. I'm very grateful for. So thank you.
Eileen?
Thank you, Leader. I really welcome this. I really like having that Pride Fund available to me to be able to sort of be proactive when somebody comes to you. You know that you can instantly help them with an issue. We had a local group in Ketley that their funding had stopped. They run a really good group for some of the over 50s. Just go and have a coffee, you know, and during the last few years it's been a real sort of godsend for people to be able to go and get together and go for that coffee. And the Pride funding allowed us to help them with their rental for the next year. So that group would have probably stopped running for this year if we hadn't been able to help them in that way. So, but I just think I like the flexibility of this. You know, there's all kinds of things that you can do, from football clubs to drop curbs where people need them to get around the area on mobility scooters. So it's really great. Hopefully we will keep this fund going so that we can just be at the forefront of helping residents on the ground. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Tim?
Or after you. Yeah, we're not going to make a habit of commending council schemes, but I mean, we're all members, so I think we're probably a bit biased in favour of the ward fund scheme as it's been constituted, as it is constituted, because it's an opportunity for us to directly do public good as we perceive it. It was fascinating reading the range of different, really fascinating to see the range of different kinds of interventions, positive interventions that can be made. And Councillor Overton's referred it to a small amount of money. I think that must be perceptions, because to me, certainly this year's and potentially next year's is quite a big sum of money. And particularly when one is able, if one is able, to leverage that with match funding that's been referred to, which might be from other members or grants, for instance, or parish council, or indeed all three. What we would ask is, and it's been referred to in the report, is the post-audit, and that post-audit process, particularly with the sums of money becoming quite big now, you know, we're up to $500,000, for instance, just to make sure value for money is the wrong term, but effective use of the money. And so we're pleased to see this propose those spot checks, and for those not be lost sight of. Thank you.
No, I'm happy with the fund. I know part of it has been partially funded by a reduction in the environmental services budget. Quite opposite on there. I'm having to pay for benches now, which might have got replaced in the past. That's what I was told. But it is welcome. It is welcome that we've got some input to the local community, which has been really useful. So no, I feel welcome.
Thank you. That isn't true. There's not been. We've invested money into the environmental services budget, actually, not reduced it. I think. Thank you, Tim, for what you said. I mean, one of the things about good ideas is that at the time when other people say it's not a good idea, you carry on with a good idea, and then a few years later, people say it was a good idea. And this is a really good example of that journey that's happened, because if you look over the last few years, when we first launched this, we were accused of trying to buy people's votes using this fund. We had situations where members refused to allocate the funding in their wards because they disagreed with the principle. And now you've got a situation, and I welcome it, where every ward member is seeing the benefit of this fund and about doing stuff and getting stuff done. And without this fund, actually, if you look at the list of things that we do, things just wouldn't happen, because you'd have to go through procurement, you'd have to go through a whole range of different things for relatively small things in communities. And trusting ward members and respecting their electoral mandate, working in their community on, relatively speaking, compared to the council's overall budget, things just to get done is really, really good, and it's something we're committed to. I think the one thing I would say is that we do need to think going forward about the relative need of funding. So I want to look at ways in which we can recognise that relative need, and there's examples from down the country where that relative need formula is looked at. It's not one for today, but it's one for another day, about how you compare and contrast that relative need. But I'm glad that it now has cross-party support. It's being used in communities up and down the borough, and I also welcome, sometimes, not always, sometimes, the recognition of ward members who allocate Telford Wrekin Council funding in their wards. I just wish that every Conservative councillor, Liberal Democrat councillor, Labour councillor would vote for the budget that makes it happen, because as we know, that isn't always the case. Councillor Waller, is there anything you want to come back on?
No, just clearly there's a clear process for officers checking any application, and I can assure you the hard work that the team do on that is very rigorous and will continue to be so.
Okay, that's been moved, that's been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. We'll move on to item 7, which is the cost of living strategy report, which I'll introduce, and then Paul will come in as a seconder. I'm delighted, albeit sad, that we're having to introduce this new strategy around the cost of living crisis. A cost of living crisis that started with inflation increasing because of the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Putin and the aftermath of COVID, but made much worse by the actions of this new government through their mini budget, borrowing billions of pounds in order to cut taxes of the richest corporations and the richest people in our country. And interest rates are going through the roof, which will affect every person in this borough. Whether you rent your home, you now are at risk of your private landlord or your social landlord hiking up your rent. If you own your own home and your fix is coming towards the end, as mine is in March, and I've got to say I'm quite worried about some of the quotes I'm getting from financial institutions compared to what was the case before. And some analysis is that on average people will be paying £500 more a month on mortgages on a typical £200,000 mortgage, which is just scary. It's scary for those individuals. It's also scary for our economy. If you take Telford Wrekin alone, that's £26 million each and every year coming out of the local economy and going to banks to service interest. That is very, very concerning. But as a council on the side of our residents, we will do all that we can to support them. The scale of the crisis means that every resident and every business across the borough will need support. And for many of those families and residents and businesses, it's support that they've never needed to ask for before. And we're already seeing that impact taking place locally. The effects are felt more in Telford Wrekin than other areas, because a third of households have in our borough have an annual household income of less than £20,000. That's almost double the UK averages. Local businesses, and we've heard from Richard, community groups are also seeing and reporting significant challenges, particularly SMEs, which account for 98% of employment in our borough. 98% of all jobs come from SMEs, and SMEs are reporting significant strain as a result of increasing costs, but also a downturn in trade. At the same time, however, the council is also facing a cost of living crisis, with things like energy prices going up 100%, with things like demand for safeguarding services and welfare support also increasing significantly. But we've made a pledge to our residents in Telford Wrekin. We're the only council in the country to make a pledge that we will freeze council tax this current year and we'll freeze council tax next year. And that pledge is reaffirmed today. We also have the lowest council tax in the Midlands, and residents pay on average £200 a year less for council tax here compared to other councils in the area, in the region. So over and above the pledge to freeze council tax, the strategy also details extensive package of wider support for the council, which is already directly providing funding to help residents and businesses affected by rising costs. To make it easier for people to find out about that range of support, we've launched an online hub, a cost of living hub, that is available online. For those who have not got internet at home, they can go into their nearest library to receive free access. And we're also going to be writing to every household in the coming weeks through our Totally Telford magazine, which will also detail a whole raft of support that's available from the council and our trusted partners. And although tackling inequality has been at the heart of all that we do as a council that protects, cares and invests to create a better borough over the last decade, the current situation means that once again we will need to step in with even more support, which is also summarised in the strategy. It's clear that the government aren't able to command the support of the markets, and there's an easy choice for them to make. They can either continue with their budget strategy, giving the richest corporations in this country a tax cut, or they can U-turn on that budget and give confidence back to the market, or they can stand by what they have tried to do, supported by Conservative MPs in the House of Commons, and make working people pay. And working people can't afford a cost of living crisis. Public services in our borough cannot afford a cost of living crisis. And you know, I've never thought that it would be possible that I speak to a resident in my ward, an 80-year-old woman, who said to me, I dialed 999 the other day and I didn't know whether an ambulance would come to me. And you speak to somebody else and they say, I've been a victim of burglary and I contacted the police and I didn't know whether the police would come to me. Or you speak to people who go in to send their kids to school and they don't know whether or not that trip, those school resources will be available for their children. This is Britain, this is Great Britain, and we deserve better. And I hope that the government reflects upon its record and helps every working member of our borough, because the alternative is frightening. I propose the cost of living recommendations in the report. Paul Waller.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And as you've said, you've summarised the broad range of support that this report shows. It's Team Telford at its best, and I want to thank the officers involved, both Fliss and Catherine, for their input, and the whole team that has worked on this. It's been a cross-council team working across the board on this. And to get it out so quickly and so ready, I mean, we didn't know that the government's actions would cause the kind of crisis that it has caused over the last, some say a week's a long time in politics. I think a day was a long time in politics for us a few weeks ago when the markets crashed and we saw the effects immediately on the household budgets in this borough. There's some really, really positive stuff though in this report. It's a dark time for us, but there's some really positive stuff about what this council, as a cooperative council, is doing to support our families across the borough, and our businesses as well. We've invested a large amount of money in our high streets over the years, because we believe that's where people want to shop and want to be. This, as the leader has said, the current situation has meant those small businesses on our high streets are struggling even more than they were before. It was hard enough before, it's become even harder now. We've worked with partners, we've worked across the board with our trusted partners to look at how we can best offer the kind of support that's going to be useful for our families and people in Telford and Wrekin. We've talked to parish and town councils about how we can work together on things rather than everybody trying to do things separately. This is there's a new grant system that we've got to look at offering support to organisations that want to offer places where people can go during the winter to help them out. We're not going to call them warm banks because we don't think they are. What we think they are places where people can get both a hot meal and some hot food and some activity. So it helps with the isolation, which we know also occurs during the winter and fits in with our strategy for quite some time. It's a great report. I think it's been done really, really quickly by the team here, Team Telford here, and I want to thank both the officers and all our partners who have been part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Kelly?
So, I mean, it's an absolutely fantastic report. I know how passionate you all are about making that offer strong, and I've seen the amount of work gone in to create it. It's fantastic. I think our local offers are brilliant. I think we offer a lot. We've got the uniform, we've got the coats, we've got the food vouchers, just a few energy rebates, and I see the letters that come in from residents and expressing how much that means and the value of that. So we know what we're doing is the right thing, and it impacts everybody's health and well-being, doesn't it? This cost of living, everybody's feeling it, whether you work. I think we're creating a working poor now. This government is hammering everybody. And I was talking to a lady on the bus the other day, and she started telling me that she's scared to put her heating on. She was in her 80s as well, and she doesn't know if she's scared she's not going to be able to afford to buy cat food for a cat, and I think she'd rather feed a cat than herself. So these are elderly people who should at their time of life be relaxing, and they've worked all their lives. They should be reaping the benefits of that now, and this government's denying them that opportunity, and it's disgraceful when only 1% are really being looked after and protected. It's disgusting when these people keep our country going and have done for a long time. So it upsets me when I see on the bus old people saying things like that, but I feel like our offer is really supporting our residents and being on their side, and I know we will continue to do that because that's what we're here to do, and I know we'll continue to do it.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, I think this is a really impressive report drawn together in quick time. There's a reason why we can do it, we can draw it together that quickly, and that's because it's already the platform on which we work. A lot of this is building on what we already do as a caring and compassionate council, and so that's why it's not been easy, but that's why it's possible. Contrast that with the government's preoccupation with helping the richest and its reliance on the old trickle-down dogma, which has been proven not to work. So you couldn't have a greater contrast. Given my portfolio, I'm particularly concerned for our most vulnerable residents who either need social care or provide care for their loved ones. Many need warm homes 24 hours a day. Our efforts include additional welfare assistance, grants to voluntary organisations, food banks, and vital contribution towards keeping residents safe and sustained. That's what we're about, but we can't do this all on our own. I believe with this report we're showing that we're doing the maximum we can, but it does require a national priority of care and compassion, not just our local one. Thank you.
Thank you. Eileen?
Thanks, Sean. It's shocking really, isn't it? It's 2022. We've got not enough police officers on the street, not enough ambulances to come and fetch people, and now I'm genuinely worried that not the usual people that we help, people on fixed incomes, people who are vulnerable, people with disabilities, but the majority of our people in this borough are going to be affected by this crisis. Working families, not knowing if they're going to be able to pay their bills, whether they're going to be able to pay for their heating, or whether they're going to be able to buy food. It's absolutely shocking. I'm really pleased that we've got such a good team here at Telford Wrekin. I wonder if we should lend them to the government to give them some ideas about the things that they should be putting in place to start protecting people at that level. I really, really am thankful to the team here for this strategy that we've put together at really short notice to try and pull together every single bit of support for not only residents but businesses as well, because as you say, 98% of our employment is in small to medium businesses within this borough. And if we can't get the government to wake up and actually do something about this from that level, then I'm genuinely worried about the future. I really welcome the support. I think there's some real positives within this, and I'm really pleased that we were able to offer the support that we are. But I just fear that there's going to be a real issue coming up if we don't have more support from government on that level. So, but I really welcome the work that's been done here, and it's a good job that the council's here to put these things in place. Otherwise, who knows what would be happening.
Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, when we're commenting on cabinet reports, we nearly, Arlene's just said it, we nearly always use the line, I welcome this report. I don't welcome this report. I'm appalled that we're having to bring this report. I welcome the excellent work of our officers in pulling it together, but I am appalled that we're having to do this. And this isn't just about the disastrous mini budget. Clearly that's been the straw that's broke the camel's back, but this has been a long time building. This has been, well, for a decade of building, as we've seen this constant withdrawing of funds to public services and all the issues that creates that my colleagues have alluded to. And you know, the Conservative government likes to talk about growth. What's the thing that has grown over the last 10 years? The number of food banks has grown. You know, we've got growing poverty, that's what's growing. And we've now hit a real crisis point, and I do think it is absolutely appalling. However, and just to say also that this cost of living crisis, as Eileen has said, affects businesses as well as residents, and it affects public services because our own costs are going up, so our ability to deliver becomes more challenging. But I am, you know, amazed, and you know, I think it's obviously building on that firm foundation that we've established over the last few years, that we are able to not only sort of pull together all the existing support that we have, which was excellent anyway, but also then add to it, and that we're bringing in new measures to support at this very critical time. So, you know, I welcome what we're bringing together, but really we just should not be in this position at all.
Lee?
Yeah, I echo what everyone else said really. I mean, pick up on what Councillor Burford said about, you know, this is a testimony to what we've got in place already, but that's because of our experience with austerity and 140 million being taken out of this council's budget over the last decade. Little did we know that that was just a warm-up act, and actually if you glimpse into the future, it is horrific. And this is, as Councillor Healy says, this is really a tome to the failure of Conservative government over the last 10 years, but it's a tribute to our council and our council officers, the way that we've operated the council, the way that we've done our very best to provide services that matter most to people, in particularly in a time of need. I particularly welcome the items around business support, and if I actually get out into our high streets, you can see businesses that are perhaps only 2 or 3 years old who are really starting to worry now. The impact of energy costs on them, the drop in trade that they're seeing already. So all the help and support that we can give them is really welcome, as well as any support we can give them to reduce their costs, particularly around energy consumption. But I think, as everyone points out, we can't do this on our own, and that was the fallacy that was presented by the Conservative government and local Conservative councillors through austerity, that actually it was nothing to do with government, it was us, and we should be more efficient as authorities. Well, all those efficiencies have been made. This is real, this is now, it's affecting people on a scale that we've not seen before. It's a really welcome report. I'm sure residents will welcome the support that's provided within this and the advice and guidance that will be provided in this. But isn't it a sad day that we're having to present a report like this to Cabinet and to Council?
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I echo the comments we said. It is a sad day that we've had to pull together this report, but as ever, the council here, you know, the administration, its officers are dedicated to protecting care and investing, and what they've done and pulled together here is credible, is, you know, acknowledgement of that hard work and the work that we've done over the last decade or so, trying to make sure that we do what we can for our residents and support them. I mean, the equality of gender, as you said, Leader, is something that we've been trying to deal with for the last decade, and the cuts to our budgets has been challenging, but this is going to make it even more challenging. It's going to make people who didn't think they were in that equalities agenda be pushed into that, because, you know, this is a cost of living crisis. You know, the talk about the increase in food banks is something we don't want to see. Those people are valuable in what they do, but, you know, this government's invested in food banks really with the way it's been behaving. And when you think now, people who used to donate to food banks can't donate to food banks because they need those resources themselves. You know, we have the Deputy Prime Minister's language on people who are on benefits in work, saying sort of to demonise the fact that they shouldn't have an increase in their benefits. This is terrible. This is not a situation people want to find themselves in, and this government's not helping them. You know, the workers that build this country, the investment that we do, and there'll be a report later in the land deal, how we try and get people into work. They're the people who build this country, not the big rich corporations who bank their money or spend it overseas. The workers invest in our country, and they're the people who need help at this time. You know, our localisers, not just our borough towns, but our localisers where people go and shop, they could lose those high streets, they could lose their pubs, they could lose their community facilities at this situation if the government don't get a grip. This report is excellent in what we're trying to do, but this is only a drop in the ocean, isn't it really? We need the government to roll back on their tax cuts. We need the government to invest in our businesses, invest in public sector, in services, because we do work with the most vulnerable, you know. And so it's a credit that the officers and the administration have put this together, but you know, there's more that needs to be done, and that it's got to be an ask of government. This is painful for some people.
Shirley.
Thank you. I feel like there's really not a lot left to say that my colleagues haven't said before, but my one worry was when my colleague said maybe we could lend our officers to the government. Well, I certainly wouldn't want it to be a straight swap. I would not lend a single one of our officers for the members that are in government at the moment. You know, unfortunately, it is, I mean, this cost of living crisis is absolutely chronic. We've got families struggling with increases in food, bills, utilities, mortgages, rents. They don't know which way to turn. Obviously, in my portfolio area, our children, our families, that is a massive worry. But we've also got the worry for our schools. They're facing problems with their utility bills. I personally feel that's a crisis on the horizon for the whole country, because I think schools, hospitals, public organisations like ourselves, we are going to have such massive increases in our utility bills, and I really can't see that help coming over the horizon, which it really needs to. This report clearly shows the range of support both for residents and businesses and our high streets. Many of us may have been surprised at quite how much support is actually out there, and we need to make sure that residents know it's there, but actually it's there because sadly our residents need it. Even now, before we get to the cost of living crisis, we have an awful lot of support in place because we are trying to do the role that I personally feel should have been doing by central government, and it certainly isn't there. And this is very much a personal thing, but I personally feel it's wrong to give money to the richest, such as removing the banker's cap on bonuses, whilst thinking it's right to take away the £20 uplift that was given to universal credit when families need it. They certainly need it now, and that would be one of my asks, that the government immediately reverses that and puts that universal credit back to families. They're families that most in need. Let's be fair, we've had a decade of cuts for Tories, and our families are now living in what I would class as working poverty. That is the difference now. I'd got a member of my staff who rang me in tears last week, didn't know which way to turn. She's on a fixed income, most people in work are. Her mortgage is coming up for renewal. The very first, lowest quote they could find was £200 a month increase overnight. She's not going to increase her wages by that. What are families going to do? We are going to have people, I think, having their homes repossessed. I think we're in for an absolute massive crisis, and this government really does need to wake up and take a grip. Sorry, but, you know, I didn't come into politics for what we've got now. I came into politics to make a difference to people's lives. But I don't want to be in the position, and I want it to be a positive difference to people's lives. And at the moment, the only hope we've got is that other parties feel exactly like I do, and they actually lobby, the opposition lobby our Tory MPs. We've got 5 MPs in Shropshire, 4 MPs now in Shropshire. They need to be making a difference. They need to be talking to the government and getting the government to listen. It's been a tremendous effort by our team, and I can only say thank you to the officers. The amount of work they've pulled together, the officers have absolutely, Team Telford has been amazing. But it's not just our officers, it's the fact we can work with our trusted partners, we can work with our town and parishes, we work with many organisations across the borough, and actually that's because we all work together, and that is what needs to happen at the moment. But I just think over and above, our officers give more than they need to, and we can't commend them enough for that. They're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leila. Where do you start? Again, thank you again to the office for such a professional work together report. And it is worrying because I know it's been exacerbated by Putin, but it was there before Putin. The government, right or wrong, has got an ideology that smaller government. Now, smaller government means less nurses, less doctors, less hospital beds, less police, less care workers, less of everything, even the legal profession. And we all know we've got a lot of that. Less of them. You know, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, they're not just an expenditure, they're doing their job. You know, you go for a blood test the other day and you see the queues of ambulances at the PRH and you think, this won't just do the PRH, it'll be every hospital in there, not look there. You can't, and I think the wealthier in this country have got to realise they have to put a hand in the pocket, never mind tax cuts. It's got to be paid for. I think the honesty that we all have to have around the table is when we say we want these things, we're going to have to say where is the money going to have to come from to pay for them. And I think I said this once when we were talking about PRH. The wealthier in the country are going to put hands in the pockets to do this. It's got to come from somewhere. The only things like that's my ideological thing. It needs to be spent. I've got two practical questions. I'm grateful for the increase of grant of 90,000 for food banks in general, and also the £130,000 grant for the Water Places initiative. And one small point I'd like to ask on that is in the past there's been an issue about that being provided by faith groups. For example, our church gives to Dawley Christian Centre for them to give to the food bank, and I've been told I can't always give, or the council can't give to faith groups, but where they're providing a service like the Dawley Food Bank, I just like that clarity that in the future we can give grants to such organisations. Thank you. You've got a good job, haven't you, Tim?
We note that there are exceptional circumstances in the country, and we know that the council has a possible strategy. I know personally I'm probably in a minority of one, possibly in the whole room, but certainly around this table from what's been described by Bill as an ideological or political point of view. I wear a blue tie, Richard's wearing a red tie. That reflects our values. Now, our values may not necessarily translate into government policy. Shirley mentioned, and forgive me using first names, mentioned lobbying the MP. I doubt very much you've lobbied your MP as much as I've lobbied mine. But that's just a personal thing about me. It's not really relevant to this debate. And also, I'm not going to be able to divulge to you the content of that lobbying. But you know, perhaps many people feel frustrations. However, with respect to this report, we recognise that the council is making a response to what are going to be exceptional circumstances, some which might be laid of our own making, others are very much of international making, will be happening whoever was in charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. To pick up the specific point from Bill, I think that rule relates to the council's pride fund rather than general grants, because the council does provide grants to faith organisations who provide food banks. But I think it's a very interesting point that I think we need to sort of reflect upon, particularly given if on the one hand we are providing grants to a faith-based food bank, why the council's pride fund can't be used in the same circumstances. So we'll certainly reflect upon that. I just want to just refer members to the strategy. There's 12 asks of government, and I genuinely hope, and Tim, I've over the years have been in a situation where I've had to defend my party line as well, and it's very difficult to do, and I think you've done it in a way that's you've not lost your own personal integrity. There's 12 asks of government. None of them are outrageous. I do hope that we can all get behind those 12 asks to make a difference to our communities. And I think I just want to say that ultimately the fire might have been alight before with austerity and 12 years of Conservative rule, and that fire may have increased because of the actions of Putin and COVID. But what the government did with their budget was to pour diesel onto that fire, and what they did the day after and the day after and the day after was rather than stop pouring that diesel onto that fire, they continued to put the diesel on the fire. And the people who are being burnt now are ordinary working families up and down the country and across Telford and Wrekin. And there's an easy political choice, which is about, there's an easy choice. It's about putting the national interest ahead of your political interest and reverse that budget and get the confidence back of the market. Because if you put political dogma ahead of the national interest, which is happening at the moment, people are going to suffer in a way which is frankly Victorian. I pick up on the points made before. You know, in 2022, sixth richest country in the world, we've seen an explosion of food banks, and that's now morally accepted as a thing that we need to have in this country by some. You've had a situation where we've launched a baby bank to help support families in Telford and Wrekin to provide nappies and basic fundamental things for newborn children. We've provided help for families to get their kids a uniform so they can go to school. We are now in a situation where today, as a result of this report, we are going to provide funding to community groups to help people stay warm. It's a moral disgrace. And I think that whatever your views upon the ideological nature of this government, if you're pro-growth, there's nothing wrong with being pro-growth, but as Richard said, where's that growth come from? That growth comes from the teacher that educates the next generation of adults in this country. That growth comes from the nurse that makes people better so they can contribute to the economy. That growth comes from the tradespeople up and down the country that need to go to work and make a living. And it comes from the farmers who make things and grow things. It does not come from those people who earn £150,000 a year or more. The top 1%. It does not come from those corporations that have got the ability to hide their assets and pay money to overseas governments because it's cheaper to do so. Yeah. This is about right and wrong, in my opinion. And the government is on the wrong side of this argument. And I think most decent people, and I include Conservatives members in this, most decent people can see exactly what's happening, and there's a moral choice ahead, and I hope that people make the decision to stand by our residents and not stand by the party. That's been proposed, it's been seconded. All those in favour? That's everyone, thank you very much indeed. Right, we'll move on then to item 8, which is the financial monitoring report for 22-23, pages 43 to 70. Right.
More good news. Cabinet, this financial monitoring report references much of what the leader and you have said and provides the latest projections in relation to the outturn for 22-23. Cabinet, as you have said, like many other councils, Telford and Wrekin is facing significant budget challenges arising from increasing costs and increasing demands for our services. Since the medium-term financial strategy was approved in March, the economic climate has changed radically, with a rapid increase in the rate of inflation, interest rates skyrocketing, and increasing demands for services from our residents. And just like our residents and businesses, this council has also been hit by these pressures. Their impact has been felt in terms of costs across all of our services, including soaring energy bills, care provider and transport costs, which were unknown when the budget was set. Furthermore, some of the impact of COVID has continued into the budgetary year. The cost of children's services has been particularly impacted. However, unlike previous years, there is no additional government funding to help us meet these costs, and I suspect there is unlikely to be in the future. So you will not be surprised when I tell you that before the application of the contingencies that were included in the overall revenue budget, the projected year-end outturn position is currently expected to be 3.2 million over budget. However, we did build contingencies into the overall revenue budget, and once these are applied, we will be left with 1.6 million of uncommitted contingency funds to meet any further pressures. The eventual outturn could of course be better or worse, and projections will be refined throughout the remainder of the year. And in view of the many uncertainties relating to government funding and the chaotic economic environment that we're working in, the Council will work hard to ensure that we retain some uncommitted reserves to allow flexibility in future years and to enable the future budget savings to be made that will no doubt come our way. Cabinet, the capital programme currently totals £105 million. Schemes are in progress, and at the time of compiling this report, projected spend was 87% of the budget allocation. Income collected in relation to council tax and sales ledger are currently slightly behind the target set, whilst income from business rates is ahead of target. Colleagues, the funding outlook for the medium term remains challenging, particularly in the light of the current inflationary pressures and the cost of living crisis, combined with the ballooning national debt resulting from recent government policy decisions. Given this, the government needs to take action to ensure that councils have the resources they need to meet these unpredicted costs, to protect our services and to enable us to help our communities recover not only from the pandemic but also to support our residents to cope with this cost of living crisis. We are almost certainly facing another period of austerity, brought about by the reckless spending of this government. But at least we can have some security knowing that this council has a strong track record of financial management, and Cabinet members and budget holders will continue to work hard to manage budgets as effectively as possible. Cabinet, you are asked to note and approve the recommendations at point 1 of the report.
Thank you, Ray. Is that seconded? Seconded, thank you. Any comments or questions for members of the Cabinet? Andy?
I wouldn't normally draw attention to an overspend in my own area, but I'll make an exception here because it's important to understand what's going on into the field of adult social care. You'll see that the variation is in excess of 2 million on adult social care for this year. Now, were it not for the sound financial management of this council, we would be in trouble with that. But we are able, as we've done in previous years, to continue to bridge the gap between the levels of funding that government give us and what we really need to run adult social care effectively. What worries me, and the report draws attention to it in terms of the uncertainties, is the situation going forward. We know that overspend is to do with the cost of providing care packages, particularly for those coming out of hospital. The implications, if we can't keep pace with that, for our hospitals and for our healthcare are huge. We are really worried going forward, unless there is increased funding for adult social care, that some of our care providers will go out of business. That will exponentially increase those kinds of overspends. So we're in a worrying situation. It's important not to let this report pass without flagging that, I think. And please don't let anyone tell you that the government have fixed adult social care and that the monies that have been provided are in any way adequate to addressing the cost of frontline care and retaining the staff we need to do the job. They barely scratch the surface. So watch this space, and I hope we see some easing of the threat here to adult social care going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee?
Yeah, I mean, welcome report, but it's a warning signal, isn't it, really, in terms of what's coming. We've had a decade of austerity, as Councillor Burford pointed out, costs in adult social care are rising. As Councillor Davies pointed out earlier, costs in children's services are increasing with no significant income extra from government to provide for that. We're facing inflation on pay, contractual inflation, construction inflation, energy costs for the authority increasing, our ability to borrow to make good investments to generate income to support frontline services is being impacted by higher interest rates. So it really is a gloomy picture, but we're not on our own, are we? That story that Ray's presented today will be told to a lesser or greater extent 330 odd times, however many councils there are in England, right up and down the country. Thankfully, we're at the better end of the scale because we've made those good decisions around investments, good borrowing to generate income to support frontline services. We've done that. We've grown businesses, the amount of businesses we've got in Telford Wrekin, so we can generate more from business rates. The number of houses that have been built in the council area has increased, which generates more council tax. We've frozen that council tax, but that generates income. So all of these things that were opposed over the years will really stand us in good stead as we go forward now. But it's not a good picture. And ultimately, I know, Councillor Nelson, you said there were exceptional circumstances. Of course, there's Putin, there's a world slowdown. We've got an exceptionally incompetent Conservative government, haven't we? And they seriously, quickly need to come up with a sensible plan that invests in services, that calms the markets, and really helps us out, because we're facing, as I said earlier, we thought austerity was bad. I don't think we've seen the half of it yet.
Thank you very much. Group leaders?
Yeah, it is, because it is worrying. I mean, we've got the usuals. We've got an overspending in adult and children's social services, which I've got no complaints about, because needs must and rates are going up. And the cavalry that's come over usually, as happened again, is the fact we've had interest provision is lower than it was anticipated. And I'm just thinking next year that isn't going to be so easy to look upon and think, oh, that could be useful to have next year when we build in the budgets. It's going to be a lot tougher. And I agree with the gloom and doom, because a report in the paper today was saying that the government are looking potentially for £60 billion worth or £65 billion worth of cuts. And they often look upon local authorities, I think, as a soft touch. Oh, we'll bring out more efficiencies, not realising actually we're probably about as efficient as we can get. So it is a appalling thing of that. And also the lack of certainty when you're trying to plan ahead. I know you aspirationally want to freeze council tax, and we would, in principle, fully support your aspirations to achieve that. But when you're looking at the prospects of uncertainty, in that we haven't got a clue what the government grants are going to be next year, because they don't let you know until virtually the last minute. It is so difficult to plan ahead. So they are tough times. But a big thank again to the finance departments here that help put all these figures together, and for the rest of the teams that have to try and find savings, which aren't very pleasant to have to do. And when you're in departments trying to save costs, which can inevitably sometimes mean people's jobs as well, it's not a pleasant thing to do, but it's what this authority has had to do, along with many other authorities up and down the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And this may or may not be the right time to raise this. Probably quite a good time to raise this in terms of our process, our transparent governance. That prior to 2019 we did have shadow cabinet briefings, which meant that individuals like me would have had briefings up front into the detail of this financial report. The cabinet, all the reports together, is 164 pages. In the 24 hours I've had, I read them all. Most of the reports I was able to form my own judgment, and I hope my group would concur with my judgment. That remains to be seen. But the financial report, without the briefing from the officers, it's extremely difficult, okay, to go into the depths of that. And that'd be true for any of us around this table, not just me. So that's just a plea to yourself, Sean, to consider that shadow opportunity. I'm not necessarily asking you to answer now, by the way, and you may not want to. I just like to mention that, but thank you very much. And then, in that regard, therefore, there are a couple of things that I have been asked to refer to. And one, I'm very reassured that my colleagues, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Tomlinson, have both already referred to, which is in the context of children's care and provision in the commercial sector, or providing our own opportunity for commercial care. My colleague on my left referred to the financial aspects of that, which frankly I'm less interested in, but you said we want the best for our children. And we'd ask, just is there an opportunity to look at bringing some of that children's care provision in-house rather than the commercial sector. And the second thing, Councillor Carter made reference to investments which then give a solid financial return. And the one I remember most fondly from 7-8 years ago is the solar farm.
which was subject to considerable debate about its financial return, and that's been dinning in my ears over many years. Let's take more specific examples of proposed budgeted expenditure. The swimming pool in Dorley, there may be significant need there, and that I'm not aware of. I think that's a £10 million capital expenditure, which is borrowed money, but it's the interest bill, which is £500,000 a year. That's quite a significant burden, and it is an area that perhaps the council could review. Thank you.
So, to pick up your first point, Tim, in respect to the shadow cabinet briefings, hopefully you are aware that your group leader gets briefings. I don't know whether or not it would be possible to form a shadow cabinet of 10 and a group of 13. But that's up to him how to manage his team. But your group leader does get and has had a briefing on this, and as is in line with all councils with a group your size, that's the way in which it's arranged. I'll come back to Ray in a moment or two, but just pick this point up about the decisions that we've made as an administration over the last 10 years, and it links back to the Council's Pride Fund actually, but in a greater way. New place, proposed by Labour, opposed by the Conservative group, now welcomed by the Conservative group. LED lighting upgrade, opposed by the Conservative group, now welcomed by the Conservative group. That's right, we can look back and I can show you, Tim. The solar farm, opposed by the Conservative group. The sun won't shine enough to make any money. We're going to sell the solar farm off, even if that's at a loss, now welcomed by the Conservative group. Running a council is very, very hard. It's very, very difficult. Lots of difficult choices to make. But what I think there needs to be some honesty and integrity around this debate is that when people call out stuff, oppose stuff, continually vote against budgets without putting forward an alternative, and then to crow about the risks at the time, then they fast forward and then try and seek credit for the tough decisions that we made. And I've got to say, it's disingenuous at best. And in regards to the swimming pool in Dorley, if your group, and I think your previous, your leader but one, who's now your deputy leader, was against that particular investment, then have the honesty and transparency of saying we're against that, we would not do that. And then stand by that. Rather than what we have is this wishy-washy approach where there's underhand, there's a tone, there's a hint. When it comes to it, you don't want to oppose it. So if you're against that particular investment, then tell your colleagues in that area of Telford Wrekin that they can't campaign for it, because at the moment there's that disconnect. And I really would like to see, and I think actually, Tim, without trying to end your political career, the way in which you've approached today is a welcome change, a very welcome change. But just be straight. Put forward alternatives. Oppose, of course, but then be straight about that afterwards. And that's not what we've been seeing over recent years. Ray, do you want to come back on anything?
I just, not wishing to prolong things, but to pick up on something that Bill said. Bill, you're right, staff have worked hard on this, and I omitted to thank them, and I should have done. 6 weeks ago, this outturn position was far worse than this. They have worked incredibly hard to find savings, and therefore you realise our position is precarious, given all the savings that have been made in Europe. So I would also publicly thank all of our staff and managers for the savings they've already found.
Thank you, Ray. Give me just a second. I missed Shirley out, so just very briefly.
I just wanted to come back quickly on something
Oh, yes, of course.
Tim mentioned, and yes, it's something I've already raised myself with officers, if it's appropriate to look and do the numbers stack up, and is it going to be correct about having any of our own provision. But without being a bit too mean, could I ask you to lobby again then for us on our behalf? And I'd ask you to lobby your government to look at the market out there for the costs, especially under the care review. Yeah, but you know, looking at the care review that's going on, if you can go back and ask them to look at placement costs, that would be a real help for us.
Yep. Thank you. Again, Tim. Been proposed.
It doesn't work that way.
Proposed seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Okay, we'll now move on to item 9, the digital strategy update, pages 71 to 90. Great.
Thank you, Leader. Something a little more positive. Cabinet, this report provides an update on the digital strategy, which was originally approved by you in June 21. Details of the actions delivered since its launch are also included with the report. Our digital strategy is another excellent example of what we in this council do best. A council-wide programme of work with numerous teams working together to achieve excellent progress in driving a strategy forward. In summary, the digital strategy is progressing well. Of the 37 actions we were aiming to deliver in 21-22, 15 have been completed. Now, in addition, a further 2 actions allocated to further years have also been completed, ahead of schedule, and with 17 further in progress. I'm going to take a minute, if I may, to share with you some examples of the progress and activities that we've undertaken. Tom, the chatbot, has answered 12,530 queries and has a 98.5% customer satisfaction. The work done on digital inclusion has enabled existing schemes to expand and new schemes to be developed. Working with a range of partners, 64 devices have been provided to support local groups and projects, with a further 50 devices now available through our new library lending scheme. There's the virtual house, which has received over 4,200 visits in 6 months. And Pride in Our High Street digital grants, ranging from £250 to £1,000, have to date provided 18 grants to our businesses. A particular note is the Gigabyte Telford project. We have partnered with Virgin Media O2 Business to deliver a 10-year, multi-million pound boost to our digital infrastructure and employment and skills in the area. This partnership includes a major upgrade programme to connect more than 200 council and public buildings to an ultra-fast full fibre network. And as part of the package, there is also a commitment from Virgin to provide skills and access to digital technology to Telford and Wrekin's voluntary, community and social enterprises. And finally, there's investment into hybrid working, much like the technology in this room that we are now in. In addition to the actions already included in the digital strategy, we seek approval for these further additions to be added. Within the digital communities, we'd like to add digital switchover in response to the UK's move to switch off analogue telephone services by 2025. This shift clearly has implications for the digital care technology sector, and the team have already started planning to ensure that telecare and social alarm services reliability and safety is not compromised, and that vulnerable people are not impacted. With Digital Place, we propose to add the replacement gazetteer management system, which is an innovative way to enable the council to manage the addresses of new builds from pre-application planning stages all the way through to street naming. In fact, we will be the first authority in the country to do this. So members, some good news to finish with, and you're invited to approve the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Ray. That's seconded. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Andy?
Yeah, it's just a coincidence, I guess. In an hour or so, I'm going to be at the Independent Living Centre where I'm going to be talking about an innovative approach in terms of digital technology for those who are receiving care. And you know, it's in the context of this report, I think, where we're showing ourselves as being forward-looking and innovative at every step. The devices which we're getting a couple of our care providers to pilot will enable people to stay in contact with their care providers more easily and very simply, you know, to get advice on medications, to keep in touch when they've got any needs, to get guidance. We found during COVID just how important that was, and we're at pains to point out this isn't a substitute for personal care. This is a complementary to that, and we're one of a handful of councils who are taking this work forward, and we're investing. This council is investing 368,000 over 3 years to develop this work. So I'm very pleased to see us taking the kinds of leads we are, and I welcome this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I welcome the report. It's really good to see how the chatbot's work. I remember when we brought it in, and it's really good that people can access the council when they can, when they want, because that's what the idea was with the customer service strategy and the digital strategy. So it's really welcome. The rollout of the fibre is good, because not only is it a contract that's going to deliver, it's also got a lot of social value in that contract. But the key thing is this digital strategy works alongside the customer strategy, because we do want people where they can use digital technology to access us, but we've always been mindful that we want to keep all our channels open so people who aren't on the digital network can still access council services. So it runs alongside, it's not taken over, and it shows that this council's accessible to all.
Thank you. Bill?
Normally, when I see the word digital strategy, my heart sings. I think, oh, blimey, no. Because I'm an IT challenge person, as my family will certainly attest to, and even have to help me fill out my onerous forms for doing me Pride money and fill them out. So that's how challenged I am. So, but I'm glad with this report that you're offering, as well as a digital strategy, unlike the HSBC bank. I haven't got to name names. You can. In the town centre that said, we're going digital, took the counter out and everything out and half the staff. So there's nobody in there you can really talk to. When you try and ring them up, they say, I'm so sorry, you are a very valued customer, but we've got a queue here, can you call back in a year's time? And even then you get the wrong blaming answer. So I'm really pleased that you're not only going digital, which the younger generation particularly welcome, but you're going to give help in terms of, now I'm really pleased about the one help through the library one, where you'll actually lend out devices. There's so many people, what was it, universal credit? People the most vulnerable in the country, oh, you've got to apply online. And can you go sometimes to a centre, anywhere to go and actually get any help? No, you have to go to Citizen Advice or something like that. So the fact we're going to give people advice and help along that way, but also we keep the phone still living and real people that people can speak to as well, I think is very welcome. But yeah, I welcome the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Tim?
Yeah, just very, very briefly, I've learned another thing that I share with Bill, along with being a councillor who lives in the borough and being almost the same age, which I didn't know, is that we're obviously short of a laptop between us, because you've all got them and we haven't. And I think that makes a point which I'm very glad that Andy's raised, and Richard, that we're recognising that the resource efficiency that the digital world permits in doing the same thing better, therefore potentially cheaper or quicker or more effectively with less errors or in a more immediate way, is transformational for our society, and has been since, I say, when I started when I worked 44 years ago, which was pre-PC and pre-mobile phone. The world has transformed, and we are more productive as a result, and councils can do things potentially better result. Even I use my Telford app, which is like pretty telling, really. I'm very glad you're recognising, nonetheless, of our residents, there'll be 10% who digital is passing them by, and we must never ever lose sight of those. We mustn't become Amazon. We must remain an organisation which is about people more than anything else. And I think that really is what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. Just want to say just two very brief things before we move back to Ray. So, just a big recognition of our team here. Other councils do digital, but often with a large third-party company. Not that isn't to say that we don't do work in partnership with companies, we do. But actually, the fact that we made an active decision to retain a core of people who can do this stuff in-house is saved us money. It's made sure that we've got customised, localised, Telford Wrekin focused things, and I think that makes a massive difference to the quality and the cost of things that we do. And thirdly, Tim, you have got I think you have, or you certainly can have a member's laptop. It'd be great to see you next time with your laptop in front of you. If nothing else, just to save the trees.
We both got one.
Save.
It's just not here.
Maybe just save the trees, Tim. Ray.
Nothing to add except to reassure both our colleagues here But we absolutely are committed to ensure that those people who cannot or for some reason choose not to use digital are not excluded. We are all, to a man and woman, committed to that.
Thank you very much. Been moved, it's been seconded. All those in favour? Is everybody? Thank you. Right, we'll come now to our last but one report, which is the Telford Land Deal.
Thank you, Leader. This is the annual report of the Telford Land Deal that we bring every year. It's a report that we're extremely proud of, actually, because of the positive impact it's continued to have across the borough. The programme is delivering new infrastructure, creating new jobs and homes, and helping business to grow, and it's also attracting investment into Telford Wrekin. It's actually the Telford Growth Deal, which is a council funded deal which sits alongside this, but this land deal is the single reason why the Labour Council in Telford and Wrekin has outperformed many other areas in terms of creating jobs, new homes and growth. For many years we've had the highest growth in the Midlands and amongst the highest in the country. So just to recap on the things it's delivered, it's a 10-year deal which was unique at the time with Homes England. I think it still is unique, and it took effect from April 2015. It will generate over £44 million. It will be invested back into local areas, supporting the delivery of new homes, jobs, commercial floor space, and generating vital income, as I said earlier, to support frontline council services during the unprecedented £140 million Conservative government cuts. It has also helped to grow the borough's provision of green network and local nature reserves, alongside providing support to the Great Crested Newt District Licensing Scheme and carbon offsetting. Highlights. I'd like to point out a couple of highlights. You know, we could sit here for a long time and talk about the various elements of success that represent the Telford Land Deal, but there are a couple of highlights I'd like to focus on. Nye Park, Newport Innovation Park, that's still one of the top 3 Department of International Trade sites that they earmarked. It's attracting high-tech businesses to Telford and Wrekin. It's providing jobs for those that live here. But importantly, and I've spoken to Harper Adams about this at length, and the businesses there, it's also providing high-skilled jobs for those who've come to study here from elsewhere in the country, and that's fantastic for our borough for lots of different reasons. And I'd just like to thank Harper Adams University, who've been fantastic in terms of their partnership and their relationship in terms of that particular development. There's also in the report talk about Magna, which at the time, I still think it still applies now, but it was the largest foreign investment into the UK for a decade, and that's provided over 300 jobs in Telford and Wrekin. There are also within the report significant detail on residential developments on brownfield land, including accommodation for social rent, affordable rent, open market sale and a care village. It's also helped the council secure funding from the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership, including to deliver enabling works and support the delivery of sustainable development with properties having PV panels and EV charging points. I don't want to keep labouring on about this, but the scheme and some of the funding that's associated with it has faced opposition, considerable opposition. Opposition to funding that we've provided to support this programme, opposition to applications to build on brownfield sites, opposition to capital investment for enabling works. And I remember a significant example of this being the little disagreement we had about funding to install the increased power supply to enable the Magna factory. It was a ridiculous argument. We needed to make that investment to deliver that factory that helped create 300 jobs. So this is a fantastic success story. I think it's something that we can be very, very proud of. It's a testament to our strategy to retain the employment of architects, of surveyors, of engineers within the employment of the council. During austerity, a lot of other councils got rid of those people. We kept them. It's a testament to their hard work, but it's also a success story on lots of different levels that's being delivered by the sheer will and determination of a Labour administration. I'd like to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Karen, secondly, you want to speak?
Yeah, sure. As the Cabinet Member for Green Spaces, and I often get people contacting me or commenting on social media in relation to when they see areas being built on, and I am absolutely the person that does want to see green spaces protected, and actually the land deal actually does allow us to do that. And I think the important point to remember is that Telford was set up as a new town, so lots of land was set aside for development belong to the government under various guises, English partnerships through to Homes England and Homes Communities Agency. So this is land that was set aside to be built on. Telford was expected to be much bigger than it actually is. We'll probably never reach the size that it was expected to be. And now what we're able to do through the land deal is take that very considered approach as to where with this land it's appropriate to build for the housing that people need, for the employment sites that people need, but also to take land out to designate as local nature reserves is set aside for nature and public recreation. And you know, that our local nature reserves have come about very much for that. And of course we do continue to protect more green spaces, and I'll be bringing another report to Cabinet soon with regard to more green guarantee sites. So, you know, I think that the deal is really innovative. It has all the benefits that Councillor Carter has talked about, but it also has that additional benefit around allowing us to have that discussion with government, with Homes England, about land that actually would be better having that use as green space for wildlife and people.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Bill?
Yes, I welcome the report as a whole. You know, with the amount of brownfield sites you've managed to redevelop and create the jobs, it's been good for that. And the borrowings that you've looked at to do for this, I've been in favour of. I've never wanted to not invest into this land. But in a very tiny, small paragraph about the Shawbirch East site, it says there'll be a planning application probably coming through in late 2022. So, first plea I'd like to make is that obviously the Shawbirch site is agricultural land.
Bill,
Currently, I'm
you
just.
know, I don't want to put you off, but
It's a
this is
principle.
Cabinet, not planning committee. I
No.
don't want anything to be
It's
said
a
to Cabinet.
principle what Cabinet can do. All I'd like to say is try and keep it as green as you can. I can make that plea. And the second point is, if a planning application, when it does come out, be mindful of public time to look at it.
Bill,
So don't
Bill,
announce it
Bill,
on Christmas
Bill,
Eve.
Bill.
No, I need to make
No,
that
I
point
know,
because
this
it is
not-
an important one,
Bill.
and we don't want another toilet roll factory.
Bill,
Thank you.
Bill, the plan application is just
It's nothing to do with it. You know how it works. So
We influence everything.
no, we don't influence plan applications.
No, we don't influence
That's,
plan
I think we've got to. You might want to withdraw that statement, Bill. We don't. The Cabinet does not
We
influence
influence
plan applications.
I didn't say it influenced planning applications, but it
You
has
did.
an influence of what can appear. Okay, I'll stick it in there. It does.
Okay.
You can tell me off, and I'll happily tell you off. Thank you.
Well, that's a very serious allegation to me. Councillor Nelson.
We note the Telford land deal update.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's everybody, thank you. The final report today is on our vision, and I first want to say a big thank you to our teams here in Telford and Wrekin Council for putting this piece of work together. It's a 10-year vision for Telford and Wrekin. It comes directly as a result of the LGA corporate peer review that we had that recommended that we ought to have a vision for the next decade. And for me, it builds on the last decade, from 2011 when Labour took control of this council, and I think we can point to things that this council has done, whether that be around children's services now being outstanding, they were verging on inadequate when we took over in 2011, whether that be regeneration of Southwater, Station Quarter and the land deal that's already been described, and a whole raft of other things. But this is a 10-year vision, and I want to also thank over almost 2,000 residents have also fed into the consultation, together with a large number of organisations, and that those organisations that have been involved in co-producing this vision are referenced at page 4 of the document. In essence, our vision is to build a more inclusive borough. And we have 4 ambitions around that. Ambition 1 is that all neighbourhoods are connected, safe and clean. Ambition 2, that everyone is able to live healthy and an independent life. Ambition 3, that everyone benefits from a good education and can fulfil their potential in a thriving economy. And ambition 4, that the environment is protected for the benefit of everyone. And I think this directly links and contributes and complements the Protect, Care and Invest mission that we have to create a better borough. Clearly, as things are with 10-year visions, it's very difficult to know what's going to happen in a decade's time. But this is an overarching vision for us as an authority, but us as a place too. And I think that the contribution that have been made from a number of organisations who are anchor organisations in our borough is something that we all should celebrate. So I'm asking Cabinet to endorse our 10-year vision. This will then play a key role in the service strategies that we will have as a council, and also the plans that partner organisations will have. And one of the biggest and most positive things from this piece of work is a real recognition actually from the LGA when they came that we are seen very much as leaders of place, and that follow-up work with those anchor organisations really reaffirm that they look to the council as a leader of place to set the tone, to set the direction, and even when there is disagreement, a recognition of the democratic mandate that we have as a borough council. So I'd like to recommend the recommendations within the report, which I formally move, and thank everyone who's been involved.
I second that.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, of course, Richard.
Yeah, can I just say, a big thanks to the team as well in helping us with our partnership and stakeholder events. They were well attended. It was great to form new relationships with some people and listen to their ideas about the vision and how they fit into our vision, as well as how they help us deliver this over the next 10 years or so, and they build their own visions from it, because there are people that we've seen passing by, and when we're sitting at a table with them and they're talking, not just like the fire service but the DWP, all with their own ideas on how we do our best to serve our residents and how they fit into it. It was a really great event. It was really popular. It was really positive, and we've come away from that knowing that our residents are fed into it and now our partners are fed into it, and it's a vision that we can all hold together the wings of and deliver for our communities.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, it was a fantastic event, wasn't it? And I think we're a diverse borough, aren't we? And I think these events represented that well. But I think the good thing is, and we've talked about it before, it's a vision that doesn't leave anyone behind, and that everybody can sort of inspire to or attain to achieve things within it. It's not a vision for the top end of the borough of things that we want, just things for everybody to be able to move forward through and achieve. So for me, and for the people in our ward, it's really good to see that sort of aspiration. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Carolyn.
I think one of the criticisms, I guess, of our current democratic system is that everything's in a kind of 4-year cycle, isn't it? And the criticism of politicians is we don't think beyond the next election. But obviously, as leaders of place, it is important as a local council that we do think much longer term, that we do work with our partners and with the public, because we did a lot of consultation on this, to set that longer term plan in terms of where we want to get to. So I really welcome that, because I think it just takes us beyond that cycle that sometimes we can get stuck in.
Thank you very much. Group leaders or representatives?
Yeah, thank you. Note that the council has a 10-year vision, and looking at the 4 priorities, we all live in the same place, we all live very similar lives, and public governance affects part of people's lives, but by no means all of their lives, and for many people not much of their lives, because they get on with their life. And so were we to create a 10-year vision, I'd be very surprised if it didn't include an aspiration for connected communities, that everyone was healthy, that we all were able to achieve the education, the benefits that education can bring in whatever form that might be, and that we would almost certainly, I'd be very surprised if we didn't have a focus on the environment. So from those points of view, positives. Specifics within the report, one is I noted in the context, I think it was the environment section, that I read the infrastructure for alternative fuels such as EV vehicles, electric vehicles, or hydrogen is in place, and didn't know that we got a hydrogen infrastructure. If we have, that's very reassuring, because I remember a strategy probably 5 or 6 years ago that referred to EV vehicles and didn't mention hydrogen. So if you have got that hydrogen infrastructure, that's a good thing. And then very much lastly, I noticed in the tourism section, the last sentence has, and the canal at Newport. So excellent, thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated.
Yeah, mine's more an overall philosophical point of it, the fact that we can act as a good advocate on behalf of our residents with regard to other agencies and groups we work with, whether it's the police through Safer Communities, whether it's the NHS to try and fight our corner for what's going on with the PRH and others. So that's our vision. We're there as well to support our local residents in whatever form we can and publicise as a local authority.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's been moved, it's been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody, and we'll call the meeting to an end. Thank you.